Okay, so here's a tutorial on how to make a really groovy title slide and turn text essentially into the imagery from a background. It's such a gorgeous thing to do and definitely kind of elevates your title slide from the typical black with white type on it. So let me just teach you something fun, and you can use this in all kinds of applications, but the thing that we're doing right now is trying to create a title slide and possibly a back end slide for the movies that we're creating. So the first thing you do is you find a background that you like. And I've picked this one from a trip to Monterey recently where there's a sunset. And I'm going to create the idea that this particular slideshow that I'm doing is all about moody skies. Let's say I've been shooting clouds and skies for a long time, and it's true, actually, I have. So I could create a beautiful slideshow just of moody skies. So that's what we're going to call this. So we've got a background. I've chosen this one, and I'm going to click on the type tool, and I'm just going to type on here moody skies. Command A. Now I'm going to come up with a new type style, type font. Actually, let's drag this down to 72 point. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we're going to select a different font because I'm not so sure this is a font that I want to use. So let's see what else we've got in here. And one thing you could do is make sure that you're on that layer and you've got your type tool selected, and you can highlight what's here in the font choices. And you can actually just use the key, the arrow key, to go up and down and scroll through all of your choices for fonts. Those are dingbats. That was kind of fun. So we're just going to pick something that has a little bit of thickness to it. I have an awful lot of fonts, and so I'm just going to make this simpler on everybody. Arial is a very basic font, and you can also change the size from here. Although the drop down only lets you go to 72, we don't have to stop there. We can actually choose something else. So let's say 150, for example, and then I just typed it in, I clicked return, and that's kind of big. But did you know you could also use the transform tool and do Command T? So I could actually move this and transform my type so that the letters get closer together. I can also change how high this is going to be. I can transform it that way. You can use the character palette to do very specific things like kerning and sizing and all that stuff, but this is also sort of a quick and fun way to alter it in ways that are just completely different. I usually like to stay at least an inch off of the sides as well, because you never know, sometimes things can get a little bit tighter on the side, so I don't necessarily want this to get cut off. And now I'm going to move the type over where I think would be a good place to choose. You know what? I'm going to make a little bit of a change here too. Let's pretend, so I can apply this, but let's pretend that I want to do this in all caps, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I'm hitting the caps lock, and I just typed in moody skies in all caps. I'm going to transform it some more because now it's gotten bigger. The letters are bigger. Why wouldn't it get bigger? So Command T, and I can drag this off the sides a little bit very easily. And now I'm actually going to position this down at the bottom. So I'm going to pick up that little cloud formation at the bottom, which I think is really cool, and I'm going to hit return. Now that essentially is the area that I have said I want my letters to be represented by from the background. So now what I'm going to do is use the magic wand. There are tons of selection tools, as you know, but this is the easiest one for this particular thing. Now what you need to notice here is this contiguous, right? So I'm going to go ahead and check contiguous, and I'm going to click on the O, for example. Now you'll notice that because I have contiguous checked, that O is the only thing it collected on this entire layer. In fact, we'll go back to layers and you can see that. It did that because I went click on a pixel, and it said, oh, all right, so everything that's black from pixel to pixel, we're going to collect. But that's not what we want. In this case, what we want is to uncheck contiguous, and when I do that again, it collects everything on the entire layer that was that pixel's color, which was black, because that's the only color we chose. Now you can turn this off, and you can see that that selection is still there, but you can see right through it, right? So now if we click on the layer 0, which is the background layer that we have that's beautiful, that is where the selection will affect. So the simple thing to do is just Command C for copy and Command V for paste. Now, as you can see in the layers palette all the way over on the right side, it says moody skies even if you can't see it. And the reason you can't see it is because it's a perfect duplicate that we just pasted over the top, right? So now we want to see it. We go to layer, we go to layer style, and let's use drop shadow, for example. And you can see that the size of the drop shadow here is set at 117. I can make that a little bit smaller. We can see that the distance of the shadow is at 41 pixels from the edge of the type. I can change that too if I want. We'll leave the opacity at 75, which is the default. And I'm going to add a stroke as well. And one of the things that's cool about adding a stroke, I can choose the size of my stroke. You have to click on it to choose it, and then it gives you the palette for the stroke. So right now it's at 4 pixels, which I frankly think is a little bit too much. So I'm going to make that slightly smaller. I'm just going to, let's type in 2. All right, so we're just making it half the size that it was. And we can change the color. So I'm clicking on the color, which is a purple, but let's say I want it to be orange, and I want it to be the exact orange pixel that's in my thing. And you can see this, that from pixel to pixel, look at how much it's changing, and it looks like it's all the same color, but it's still changing, not maybe dramatically, but enough, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay, that's what I like. Or I could choose this sort of a, well, yellowy. On my screen, to me anyway, it looks a little bit more blue, but it's actually quite yellow. And here's a more intense blue, which turns out to be kind of gray in the palette. But let's say I move the slider up into the blues, then it actually looks blue enough, certainly blue enough, still that just that side of gray. I could choose pink. I could choose any color. I could go back to this orange. Just for the sake of this experience, we're going to say, okay, orange is fine. I'm going to say OK. And now I'm on the Moody Skies layer, so I can move this around, right? Literally just pick it up and drag it around, and I can put it right in the center. I could put it right anywhere I want to, right? So I might even want to put it slightly at the top, because it could be that I want to say, you know, Moody something. It could just be your name, like by John Smith, right? Generally, centered isn't always as interesting. Slightly off center, slightly above is interesting. And also, this is totally a matter of taste. So you should do what you like. All right. But I'm pretty satisfied with that. And I'm just going to say, okay. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. And it's going to save as a PSD, right? So sunset title slide. Let's go ahead and put this on my desktop. And I'm just going to save it, because that way I have easy access in case I want to make some changes. In fact, one more change I want to tell you about, that I could alter the colors of this just by doing Command U for saturation. And in this palette, I could actually change the hue of it if I wanted to. You can have a lot of fun. It still stays exactly the same imagery, but I could change the hue, 0. I'm going to type in 0 there, and I can change the saturation right from here. Maybe I just want it to pop a little bit brighter. So I've upped it 33 degrees, and I'm going to say, yeah, you know what, I want that. And because I already saved it as a PSD, I'll just do Command S and just save it. But now I'm ready. Let's pretend it's all perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. And I'm going to just say save as, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And I'm going to show you one more thing after this. So this is also on the desktop. Now it's still, the PSD is still here. But let's say you wanted to put this on a black background. At least it's not just plain old white type on a black background, right? You can create a new layer, Shift Command N for new layer, say OK. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill this with black. This is the gradient tool. This is black. And I've got it on the first setting here. And it shows all black here. And I'm just going to do that. And it just covered it all. And it covered it all because the layer was on top. So I'm just going to click and drag the layer underneath the Moody Skies word. And if I like it, I can save it as a PSD. I can also turn this off and do again a save as your JPEG. Now, once you've made your decision, one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that this is sized for your slideshow. Now, I'm recommending a 9:6 at 300 dpi, which is still very, very high quality and will look great in your slideshow. So let's go ahead and resize this. So I'm using the crop tool, and I'm typed in 9 inches by 6 inches at 300 dpi using the width, height, and resolution selection here. And I'm going to go ahead and if I want to, I can bring this in a little bit and hit return. And now this is a 9:6 exactly image at 300 dpi. And I'm going to do my save as, and I'm going to put a little F at the end of it, because that, to me, that means you'll find your own standard, file names, etc. But to me, I know that that's my final selection. It says sunset title slide F. You might even say, front slide. You might say back slide, however you want to do it. And I'm going to say save, and it's going to save onto my desktop at the quality of high, which is the maximum. Okay. So essentially, that's your title slide. So you have a front slide, and then we could create a back slide as well, and I'm going to let you do that. But the reason you should create a back slide is because you might be using some music from an outside source that, we talked about royalty-free music, but that doesn't mean that they don't want credit. And they will let you use it sometimes free as long as you give them a credit. So I would go ahead and say, the music name and their name, whatever that is, and there might even be a website that you want to go ahead and attribute to them. You would also put on a backslide, your name, your website, if you want somebody to go there, even your phone number. Why not? So I hope that helped, and I can't wait to see what you create.